All right. Oh, good morning, everyone. It's 11 o'clock here and a beautiful day in Santa Cruz, California. I live in the mountains in Ben Lomond, California, just above the town of Santa Cruz. And I can't tell you how excited I am to present a topic that has been dear to my heart since the very beginning of my career in herbal medicine. How to integrate Western Ayurvedic medicine with traditional Chinese medicine. And I think you're going to have to overlook the fact that I may not be able to get through everything that I have prepared for you, but you're going to have access to all of this in your notes. And I don't think it's oftentimes that important for me to necessarily stick to the notes rigidly because, after all, you got me here in front of you, and I like to speak off the cuff sometimes, and I've prepared some off the cuff things just to begin. Uh, to begin with, we're talking about Western herbs. I know you see many presenters sipping their cups of tea when they talk, but let me tell you what's in my cup of tea. It happens to be licorice root tea, and I'm going to take a little sip right now because, from a Western standpoint, licorice root has uses that oftentimes are emphasized in Western herbal medicine that are not so much emphasized in Chinese medicine. Uh, Licorice in Western herbal medicine happens to be extremely good for moistening your throat. That's one thing. And of course, if I'm going to be sitting here speaking for 2 hours with you, that would be an issue that I'd like to be able to use this tea for, rather than something that might dry my throat, such as tea might do, green tea or black tea. Uh, Licorice has many other uses, but in Chinese medicine, it probably is the most common herb that there is, but it's always used in generally very small amounts. I know there's one formula that says only licorice by itself. It's a formula using only licorice. But in general, in Chinese medicine, licorice is thrown in and it says it harmonizes. In Western herbal medicine, licorice is used for ulcers and digestion, for bronchial conditions, for healing sore throat, for colds and flus. Typically, that's one of the uses that is used for in Ayurvedic medicine. So you can see right off the bat that learning three different systems here and being familiar with them, not that you're going to be a master of all of them, but just being enough familiar with them that actually broadens your understanding of the herbs that you're using. And it's a lot more fun. And if you think that's a challenge to do, as many people many years ago when I formulated the idea of planetary herbology, they said, well, how can I learn Western herbal medicine and Ayurvedic medicine or Chinese herbal medicine when each one of those may take several lifetimes to master in themselves? And I agree with you. I dare say that for most of us who have studied Chinese medicine, and I've gone into it very deeply, I teach it. I have a course called East-West Herb Course, and we teach planetary herbology, but it's a complete course in Chinese medicine as well as Western herbal medicine and Ayurveda. So I feel like I know enough of it to say that regarding licorice, particularly, the reason why it's used in such small amounts, one of my first teachers called it the peacemaker. You read in books it says it harmonizes things. Well, now what does that actually mean? Well, from a Western standpoint, Western herbalist standpoint, licorice is an analog to cortisone. It doesn't actually put cortisone in the body, but it actually is a cortisone sparing herb. In other words, it allows your body to not use up uh, uh, for the cortisone to continue to circulate in your body, and it uses your body's own initial uh, uh, secretion of cortisone from the adrenal glands, cortisol, so that while it doesn't add anything, it makes it go longer, and so it's almost the same as adding more cortisone to any herbal formula. So a harmonizer, a peacemaker, means that you're putting a small amount of licorice so that any possible side effects or interactions that might occur from one herb or the combination of herbs or the peculiarity of the person who's taking it that might react to the formula. Harmonizing means it's going to lessen the possibility of those effects happening. It's going to smooth it out, because you're having cortisone, and cortisone means it lessens reactions. And in that way, licorice has a very important use in that sense, but overuse of it over a long protracted period of time actually produces the side effects that you would get from cortisone, which is why it's used in like 3-gram doses in Chinese herbal formulas, or even sometimes even less. So a little bit about my own journey, because I think, let's see here, that was me back when I was just sitting there wondering about herbal medicine and just kind of discovering them, living in a commune in Northern California, kind of refugee from Haight-Ashbury. 35 people of us went and bought this land up in the Northern California. We still own it in trust, and it still is free land for people to go and live on if they wish. And that's where I started wandering around in 1968, wondering what all these plants were that I suddenly discovered after leaving the city in the forest. And our goal was to become self-sufficient. It's always a good goal in life, I think. And so we tried to become self-sufficient in food and in medicine. And I took it upon myself. For some reason, I just felt this calling. Literally, when I walked through the woods, I'd feel these plants like Pipsissewa and Mahonia and wild ginger and all these different natural herbs that were there, elderflowers. They just would beckon to me, and they would say, "Here I am, find out what I'm good for." And I would just be very excited. I had no college background whatsoever. I had no botany background whatsoever. My method was to pull out books that had pictures, and if I could discover one plant in one day, I thought it was a treasure. It's a very different way than many of you may have learned who went to a college of acupuncture or Chinese medicine, where you're supposed to memorize I don't know how many plants in a week or a semester, and be able to spit it all out at the end of an exam and expect that you actually know the plants then. I think the way I learned has a lot to say for it. The way you learned also has a lot to say for it. I'm just getting off of a week-long ecstatic week of where we had an intensive here with our own students, East-West herb students, about 80 of us living in the mountains here at the Quaker Center, and teaching and learning herbs all week long. And amongst the students was a shaman from the Peruvian jungle. She actually came to study with us. It was really a strange thing to think about that. And she told me how how she learns herbs there, where they would she would fast on one herb for 3 months and just take nothing but that herb, sometimes for 2 years. They'd take ayahuasca, which was a teaching process, and then they would take this herb until it revealed itself to them. Now, I didn't do it that way, but that was how they do it there. And so there's just a lot of ways of learning about herbal medicine, and I think each one has something positive about it. I think it's really great the way they teach in Chinese medicine these days, because it's systematic. You go from one thing to the next. But let's face it, when we graduate from these schools, a lot of what we learned just goes by the wayside, because if you don't use it, you lose it. And that goes for everything in life. So I would say that for me, my way of herbs took that path. There were no schools when I was back there in that picture in 1968 or so, when it was taken. And there were no schools. Acupuncture and Chinese medicine had not come to America. The only thing that was happening was Worsley in England. And you may have heard of Ephraim and Harriet Korngold. They were there at the commune with me. And at some point after 3 years or so that we were there, we both, they had an opportunity to go to England and study acupuncture, and I had the opportunity to go study herbal medicine with Dr. Christopher, one of my first teachers, and a woman named Norma Myers in Vancouver, British Columbia. And we agreed that when we both got together, we would teach each other what we learned. It was a kind of a neat pact between brothers living in a commune, and it felt really, really cool to do it that way. And which is what we really did. And so he taught me acupuncture. He was my first acupuncture teacher, and I started out with the 5-element system and gradually integrated TCM. And so my first exposure to herbal medicine, as you can see, was with Western herbal medicine. Now, I'm going to take the opportunity here of showing you some plants that I just picked out from my garden, which outside, because I grow a whole lot of herbs, many of which I use in my clinic. And this is one of the joys of being of adopting Western herbal medicine, because you don't have to be dependent upon things that come from the other side of the planet that are either neatly or not so neatly coming from bins in arcane Chinese sources, with a lot of people sometimes being a little snooty about their products versus the others. You can grow a lot of these plants yourself and have a great fun and really fulfill the mission that I think many of you had made to yourself when you decided to get on the path of healing. Healing, to me, is not just a profession. Matter of fact, it's secondarily a profession. It turned out to be a very good one for me, but healing for me is a calling, and I sort of regret the idea that for many people who get into it these days, it's more of a profession. But anyway, what I'm holding here is Comfrey Leaf. And in the lessons to come, this one probably will appear in the third lesson or the next lesson, where I'm going to be talking about respiratory diseases. Comfrey is going to become very, very important. And we're going to talk about the issues about it being claimed to have toxicity and so forth. And how do we deal with these kinds of things when federal agencies interfere with our plants and tell us that we can't use things like wild ginger because it has aristolochic acid in it. There are certain herbs like ma huang. If you take that out of the materia medica, it's like I'm a pianist. It's like taking middle C off the piano. If you don't have your materia medica to play the music of herbal medicine, then you're not going to be able to run a full practice. And Comfrey is that way in terms of Western herbal medicine. It's a tremendous healing herb. It's called a vulnerary, but it has many other uses as well. Pulling out another one very briefly, this is a Chinese herb, and so I love growing Chinese herbs in my garden, and this was one of the reasons why perhaps a lot of the Chinese people, when I first would frequent the stores in San Francisco, Chinatown in San Francisco, and I'd talk to them, well, what about growing Chinese herbs here in North America? And they would tell me, well, it's okay, but the soil is different. They're not as good. So, it's either that was a conversation about, buy my herbs because they're better, or otherwise maybe there's something to it. I think it's a combination of both. Because there are certain Chinese herbs that it doesn't make any difference what soil you grow them in. They're going to be potent in any case. But some of the more refined herbs, the tonics particularly, which is one of the reasons why I gravitated towards integrating Chinese herbs into my Western herbal practice, because Western herbs is very deficient in the concept of tonification, and Chinese medicine is very, very strong on that whole aspect. We all know about looking for deficiencies in disease. Anyway, this is Acryanthus Nushi, and Acryanthus bidentata, and I planted it several years ago in my garden, and now it springs up all over the place as a weed. It's not an invasive weed, so I can deal with it very nicely, but the root is used, as you know, for as a blood-moving herb and for yin tonification. Then we have artichoke leaf. Artichokes happen to grow very well in this part of the country, and matter of fact, I think nearby in Gilroy, it's called the artichoke capital of the world. Artichoke leaf is part of the thistle family, and thistles are notoriously the leaves are always bitter. You all know about milk thistle, and that's going to appear in future lessons. We're going to talk about that herb. There are some herbs in Western herbal medicine that surpass the ones that we use in Chinese medicine in certain of their properties, and we'll talk about a few of those. But milk thistle would be one of those. So much so that now, while it was never really part of traditional practice in China, now they're actually using milk thistle seed because it is a regenerative tonic for the liver, very specific for cancer because of powerful antioxidant properties, and for building and strengthening the liver in all possible ways. It's very specific for HIV and cancer, and I give it to every cancer patient that I see and everyone who has HIV condition. And some of you may or may not know this one. I just picked this again. It was probably more than about 30 or 40 feet from my backyard, which is, I have an extensive herb garden back here, which I love to show people. And I had my 80 students tromping around showing them the plants. We had Brian Weisbach, who's a genius in terms of integrating Western herbs into Chinese medicine. His company's called KW Botanicals, and I'll mention that again, KW Botanicals, because you might want to look that up. He's a great reference person for finding formulas for specifically difficult conditions, because he doesn't rely only on the TCM classical formulas, but he'll draw from a lot from even some of the more obscure Western herbs on this continent that he'll put into formulas tailor-made for your patients based on forms that you fill out. Anyway, we had him, and he's the type of guy that could sit around on one plant and talk for 2 hours, and he did practically did that with yarrow, and I had to cut him short. I said, I don't use that much yarrow, and it doesn't justify 2 hours of my time hearing you talk about it, but it still is fascinating to do that. But this is polygonatum, and I can't remember offhand the Chinese name for it. If anybody has it, you can post it up there on the board or on the live chat. Maybe everybody will be reminded of it. It's in the lily family, and it is a yin tonic, especially good for the lungs, and also I think for spleen qi to some extent. Properties very similar to qianmendong, which is Chinese asparagus, which is also pretty much identical to shatavari, which is an Ayurvedic medicine, and shatavari is basically the tonic of choice for gynecology in Ayurvedic medicine. Now, when we look at that herb, and including this herb, they all have similar properties in that they're moistening, they're yin nourishing, and as a matter of fact, the leaves and the root of this plant are eaten as food, as many of the tonics are that I think, again, this is not oftentimes pointed out. When we sit in school and learn about these things, and it's fun to just munch on them. You read about the taste. Why not go ahead and actually taste the plant, and maybe you'll learn something from the way it's called organoleptic, how the plant feels, how when you touch it. Here's this very smooth leaf, and this white color, telling you it's about lungs and so forth. So the plant just kind of like begins to reveal some of its secrets to you just through the experience of interacting with it. That's something that happens when we are working from a Western herbal perspective more than in a Chinese herbal perspective, where we rely on things that be coming to us from pharmacies and distant lands and so forth. And as we get into this, I will be emphasizing the fact that not that many of these plants that when I started out, we can't count on them always being available to us in the future. As the Chinese economy grows, I remember when I used to buy a pound of Lonicera, which is the Chinese honeysuckle, for $3 or $4 a pound. That was a solid brick. Now, if you ever had the experience of going to a honeysuckle bush and actually trying to pick a pound dry weight of honeysuckle blossoms, you'll see how much labor was involved in that. And whether or not that's going to be cost effective, that we can rely on it, in the years to come as the Chinese economy grows and people's time is worth more than it has been in the past.